On World News Tonight this Monday, what now for Bill Clinton? A Senate trial is supposed to be next, but what about a deal? Maybe both. One mother, 8 babies. We'll take a closer look tonight at fertility drugs. And Pan Am 103. It is 10 years since the tragedy now. It's about having the strength to go on.
From ABC News World Headquarters in New York, this is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings.
Good evening. So if you've been impeached on Saturday, what do you do on Monday? For President Clinton, the political landscape is vastly different than it was a few days ago. A trial in the Senate awaits, which means his career still hangs in the balance. Certainly the polls offer some comfort. After all that tension this weekend, his job approval rating has risen to 67%. And whether you judge it sympathy or anger at the House Republicans, 56% in our poll say Mr. Clinton should stand up to a trial rather than resign. That's 14 points higher than last week. There is some underlying trouble to be seen. Barely a third of Americans say they would be angry if the Senate decided to remove him. So on the Monday, after you've been impeached, what does a president do? Here's ABC's John Cochran.
Dancing and prancing in Jingle Bell Square.
This holiday ritual might seem irrelevant to the president's fate, stopping off at a soup kitchen. But it is very relevant. Clinton's aides want him out in public at events that reflect his compassion, one way to keep his approval ratings high. When asked if he had a message for the Senate, he said only,
So I hope that they and the country will take some time to think about other people and to do something in the spirit of the season.
Today, 2 former presidents, Jimmy Carter and Gerald Ford, suggested a compromise. The president would accept a bipartisan resolution of censure and admit that he did not tell the truth under oath. The Senate would guarantee that his admission cannot be used in any future criminal trial when Mr. Clinton leaves office. The White House has said the president will never admit lying under oath.
I do.
Today, spokesman Joe Lockhart welcomed efforts to reach a compromise, but as for the specifics of the offer,
I'm not saying anything.
a number of prominent Democrats warned the White House today that before there can be any deal, the Constitution must be honored by starting a trial and presenting charges and at least some evidence. Those same Democrats also warned the president against any legal delays, any legal maneuvering, such as asking the Supreme Court to declare null and void the impeachment passed by a lame duck House. Those delays, said those Democrats, would only anger the Senate and the public. Although the White House is looking for a compromise, there are still hard feelings here that were evident when spokesman Lockhart was asked about Time magazine's Men of the Year cover, showing Clinton and Ken Starr.
They told me I couldn't say this, but I'm going to say it anyway. I thought it was a perfect bipartisan cover, the leader of the Democratic and the Republican Party.
The Clinton White House, like the president himself, is undergoing mood swings. The president, we are told, goes through periods of great sadness. And yet he was beaming over the weekend when he told some old friends, this will all be over in 30 days. John Cochran, ABC News, the White House.
In the political tempest that has been the impeachment process, there are, as you know, several careers that have been changed forever. One of those belongs to Congressman Dennis Hastert of Illinois, who was unknown to most Americans on Friday, and who come January will have one of the most powerful jobs in the U.S. government when he's the new Speaker of the House. Dennis Hastert, who will soon be 57, was a high school teacher and a wrestling coach before he was a politician.
Speaker Gingrich and myself and many other members of Congress.
He represents the largely Republican suburbs west of Chicago. He was a state legislator in Illinois before he ran for Congress in 1986.
All right. It is Thursday and Friday.
He is described as a conservative, but not an ideologue.
There's a big role to play. I think we need to bring our conference together. We need to heal the wounds, and we need to reach out across the aisle.
Hastert has risen quite high in Republican ranks while keeping a fairly low profile.
I didn't really seek this at all. It just kind of happened all of a sudden.
So far, at least, a man without obvious enemies. Now the other big, much more personal story of the day. In Houston, the world's first surviving octuplets are struggling to survive tonight. Octuplets as in 8. The 6 girls and 2 boys are in critical but stable condition. Their mother had been taking fertility drugs. She went without food late in her pregnancy to make extra room for the babies to grow. A remarkable woman, her doctor said. Here's ABC's Jane Clayson.
Doctors at Texas Children's Hospital say 27-year-old Nikum Chukwu is just relieved her children are alive, even though they are in critical condition.
I walked in, I said, "How are you doing, Nikum?" She said, "I'm blessed." So I know she's doing well.
The first child was born 2 weeks ago. Doctors used drugs to stop the other 7 from coming until yesterday, when an assembly line of 40 doctors and nurses delivered the babies by cesarean section in just under 3 minutes. The babies weigh between 11 ounces and just under 2 pounds. Doctors say they have an 85% chance of surviving various complications.
Initially lung problems. The next issue will be blood pressure problems and potential heart problems.
Nikum Chukwu left her home in Houston 2.5 months ago to be hospitalized. She spent some of that time lying at a steep, uncomfortable incline to lessen the pressure of 25 pounds of baby weight.
She was quite remarkable that she was able to live in an upside-down position with head lower than her feet for over 2 weeks.
The Chukwus are Americans originally from Nigeria. He's a respiratory therapist. Doctors say the couple is deeply religious and never considered aborting 1 or 2 of the fetuses in order to give the others a better chance. The mother of the only known octuplets may go home this week, but her children will be here well into the new year. Jane Clayson, ABC News, Houston.
Think for a moment how tiny those babies are. We're going to take a closer look a little later in the broadcast at fertility drugs and the boom in multiple births. In just a moment, how successful were the airstrikes against Iraq?
This is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings. Brought to you by the makers of new Advil liquid gels.
In Iraq today, the Deputy Prime Minister Tariq Aziz ridiculed the U.S. military. After 4 days of bombing, a policy of hatred, he called it, Mr. Aziz said the U.S. had failed to seriously harm either the Iraqi government or the military. For the most part, it's virtually inevitable that the U.S. and Iraq will reach different conclusions about all these raids. But in measuring success, as of tonight, there is some measure of agreement. ABC's John McCarthy reports from the Pentagon.
The U.S. claims to have hit 85% of its targets, making this one of the most accurate air campaigns ever conducted. But military officials concede that many of the buildings that were hit were empty. Equipment, troops, and political leaders were gone.
You might look at something like this, and one of our analysts would say this is moderate or light damage. But I guarantee you, nobody's working this morning in Ba'ath Party headquarters.
Some of the most intense attacks were aimed at Iraq's ballistic missile program.
We estimate that we delayed Iraq's development of ballistic missiles by at least a year.
But a U.S. intelligence report obtained by ABC News said most critical equipment from inside the missile plants had been moved, and Iraqi technicians that build the missiles were at home in bed. As for Saddam Hussein's weapons of mass destruction, the U.S. did not target facilities that might be converted quickly to mass-produce such weapons, including pharmaceutical and food processing plants and breweries. These, say Pentagon officials, were not hit for fear thousands of civilians would be killed by plumes of poison gas or deadly viruses that might have been stored there. Many believe the job of containing Iraq is far from finished, raising tough questions for the future. Will the U.S. have to bomb again, and under what circumstances? Will even more American troops have to be permanently stationed in the Gulf, and at what cost? And finally, can the U.S. hold the line on economic sanctions, even though sympathy for Iraq, even among America's allies, seems to be growing? John McCarthy, ABC News, the Pentagon.
One other note from the Middle East. In Israel today, the parliament showed its total lack of confidence in Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu by voting to hold new elections. That means until the spring, the Israeli-Palestinian peace agreement will basically be on hold. When we come back, flying the route to China without permission. The latest attempt to fly around the world in a balloon is in question tonight. Richard Branson and Steve Fawcett lifted off from Morocco on Friday for a trip that they hoped would last about 2 weeks. They spent several hours today hovering over the Himalayas, waiting for permission to enter Chinese airspace. Here's ABC's Sheila McVicker.
High above some of the most inhospitable terrain on the planet, the three balloonists came up against China's refusal to let them cross. Near the Chinese border, American Steve Fawcett spoke to ABC News.
We don't know what happened, whether they'll just let us pass through, or whether they'll force us to land, or whether they'll start shooting. So we're quite worried.
The ground team said China had given permission to fly a narrow southern route, but detours to avoid Iraq and winds that would not cooperate brought the balloon too far north.
Well, our options are very limited, in fact, practically none. We're unable to land here because these are very high mountains.
Late today, they did enter China with no permission. And if Chinese authorities do demand that the balloonists land, they cannot come down safely until they clear these treacherous mountains. Sheila McVicker, ABC News, London.
The United States is unhappy with China tonight. China has shut the door on dissent in a very forceful way today, sentencing two pro-democracy campaigners to very long prison terms. China recently signed a treaty promising to respect human rights, and it sent a very different message today. In Beijing, for us, ABC's Jim Laurie.
Xu Wenli was years ago after serving 12 years in jail because he'd campaigned for democratic reform. Today he got another 13-year sentence for wanting one thing, a legal opposition party. His trial, a mere 3-hour hearing in a court cordoned off by police and off-limits to the press and public. Xu's wife says a fair trial was never possible. Xu was denied his own attorney and given no time to prepare a defense.
This at a time when many thought that China was becoming more tolerant of political dissent. Now the Chinese have virtually crushed the tiny democracy movement.
President Jiang Zemin has laid down the line in harsher terms than have been heard in years. The socialist system cannot be weakened, says Jiang. Western political systems must never be copied. What's extraordinary about all this is China's democracy movement is so small, a few hundred people, tiny groups like this meeting secretly. Yet in the words of Jiang Zemin, they must be nipped in the bud. Jim Laurie, ABC News, Beijing.
On the money tonight, a nasty trade dispute between the U.S. and Europe about bananas. The U.S. is about to impose a 100% tax on European imports, ranging from handbags and cashmere sweaters to sheep's milk used to make cheese. This is because the U.S. says the European Union gives preferential treatment in the banana trade to its former colonies. The U.S. claims this is unfair to American banana companies. On Wall Street today, investors don't seem to think the impeachment vote poses much of a threat to the economy. The Dow Jones Industrial Average was up more than 85 points to close at 89.88. On the NASDAQ, stocks were up more than 51 points. In our regular report about how the government spends some of your tax dollars, student loans and fake paperwork tonight. This is about loans intended for students who want to study at colleges overseas, and those who figured out how you can get your money without ever going to school. Here's ABC's James Walker.
April 14, 1998. Federal agents spot Henry Brutus in El Paso, Texas. He's trying to defraud the student loan program again, claiming he's attending school in the Caribbean.
I'm going to school in Dominican Republic.
But the school had closed 2 months before. Brutus had already ripped off taxpayers for $18,000. All he had to do was forge the signature of a medical school official certifying he was enrolled in that university. Stephen Vassell falsified 6 loan applications and collected $21,000 to attend a university in the Caribbean. How simple is the fraud?
Relatively simple, if one is willing to make various false statements and forge documents.
So simple that Mohammed Bilal Afif Ibrahim filled out 22 phony loan applications and received $400,000. Here's how they got away with it. Tuition checks are mailed directly to the students, but Education Department officials do not even know if those students are attending school.
We are identifying new cases on a consistent basis.
Diane Van Riper is an Assistant Inspector General for the Department of Education. Her team uncovered the schemes.
Do you think the Department of Education has moved aggressively to stop the fraud?
No.
How hard would it be to stop the fraud?
It wouldn't be hard at all.
Education Department officials concede there are serious problems.
We simply don't have the resources to travel to these institutions to review them in the same way that we do domestic programs.
So far, 18 people have been charged with fraud totaling $4 million. But the program is so easy to rip off, the losses could be millions more. No one knows. It's your money. James Walker, ABC News, Washington.
When we come back, we'll take a closer look at fertility drugs. Take a closer look at fertility drugs tonight. As we said, for many people, they do conjure up precisely the multiple births that have taken place for Mrs. Chukwu in Dallas, and before that for Mrs. McCoy, who had, you'll remember, 7 babies a year ago in Iowa. By one estimate, more than 10% of American couples experience infertility, and fertility drugs are increasingly popular. ABC's John McKenzie tonight on the rewards and the risks.
For couples experiencing infertility, modern medicine has not only increased the odds of having a baby, it's increased the odds of having more than one. In the past 25 years, the number of multiple births of triplets or more has soared 328% to more than 152 out of every 100,000 births in this country.
It's an unfortunate side effect of the package, but you have to look at the bigger picture, which is the thousands of couples who every year can now have their own children.
Today, the vast majority of multiple births are not the result of in vitro fertilization, where technicians join egg and sperm in a lab dish, but of something simpler, a procedure called ovulation induction. A woman receives a daily injection of a powerful drug that puts her ovaries into overdrive. The result, not just one egg, but a batch of eggs in the uterus, waiting to be fertilized. That was the approach used on the octuplet mother in Houston.
Ovulation induction has helped more patients get pregnant than just about any other technology we have. Unfortunately, we don't have quite the control.
And that is a problem. The more fetuses a woman carries, the more likely she is to miscarry. And if they are born, they're more likely to be born prematurely, dramatically increasing the risk of complications to virtually every organ. So many couples decide to reduce the number of fetuses.
Numbers show very clearly that we can improve the take-home healthy baby rate for couples with multiple pregnancies by reducing the number down to a manageable number, usually twins, at the end of the first trimester.
But doctors say there are ways to prevent some infertility cases from ever getting that far. Using blood tests to monitor hormone levels and ultrasound to see the developing eggs, doctors can determine whether a woman has produced too many eggs well before they're ever fertilized.
Then I will stop the cycle in the middle. I will wait for the next month, give a lower dosage of medication, and ensure that she is going to get pregnant with a safer number.
Infertility treatments have pushed the frontiers of medicine to produce children for couples who otherwise could not conceive. But now, considering the risks, most doctors want to ensure they don't produce too many. John McKenzie, ABC News, New York.
We'll be back in just a moment. Finally this evening, disaster at Christmas. That's what we called it 10 years ago tonight when Pan Am Flight 103 from London to New York was blown out of the sky over Scotland, taking so many lives and changing so many others. For many of the families who were left with so much less, anniversaries are a time to look for new strength. Here's ABC's Aaron Brown.
In the historic places where nations mourn and remember, the names were read.
My daughter, Catherine Augusta Hollister.
At Westminster in London and at the memorial at Arlington, eulogies were delivered.
We dedicate this day of the winter solstice to the memory of all who were lost, to the families who understand its meaning as no others can.
And now, please join me. People could close their eyes and still see that unforgettable image. 270 people died that day, the youngest 2 months old, the oldest 82, average age 27. 35 of the dead were coming home to Syracuse, New York. Students, mostly, remembered in a service there today. The dead included Alexia Saris, a budding photojournalist whose parents have set up a foundation so others will remember what they cannot forget.
Initially, you work toward what they call closure. I don't think there is anything such as closure.
Not for her and not for the Lowensteins who returned to Lockerbie this weekend. each trip back painful, none though like the first.
We were taken by the farmer to the spot where our son landed. It was a small crater. It's quite possibly the most awful thing I've ever seen in my life, but I'm grateful that I saw it.
This weekend in Lockerbie, families were welcomed again as they had been 10 years ago, and tonight in the Central Church they mourn together, bound together in tragedy. It's hard to describe, said one man, that such a tragedy could have fostered a new group of friends, all of whom agree we wish we had never met. Aaron Brown, ABC News.
Anniversaries are for gathering strength. That's our report on World News Tonight. I'm Peter Jennings. Good night.